All right, you maggots, listen up. One of the hard parts of working on the Hallicrafters SX42 is the documentation. The schematics are slightly different for different models of the same thing, different rev levels. They call it runs. I think they call it runs. So anyway, uh, I spent like 3 hours trying to find out the value of this capacitor right here. And I traced the wire all through the radio. On the schematic, it shows this capacitor down here. Let me get into frame. There's a like a tree of resistors and voltage drops, and this cap up here is shown down on that tree. And I finally found my way down to here. Now it's 180 picofarad, so you don't pull your hair out. Now the other thing is back in here. There's a square black capacitor. In my case, mine's still good, and I couldn't even get my cap checker in there. It's buried back in there. And at first I tried the original trick of taking these two capacitors and bending them over, cutting the wires, undoing the bolt, bending them over, trying to get into the top, couldn't. That was the trick I used over in here. And I have another one of those caps over in here that tested good, and I left it in. But anyway, how I got to the cap was I removed one wire from the coil, took the slugs out, take the slugs out, put them off to the side in order. I think they're the same slug, but this one, they cut some of the slug off. They broke some of it off. Or that's just this radio itself. After you take the slug out and you note how far in it is, because you're going to have to redo it in the alignment, there are screws in each coil that hold it on. These coils are not mounted from the top with a screw like other radios. You have to take the slug out and you'll find the screw. After taking the screw out, undo wire, I was able to push these down and over, and I was able to get in there on the capacitor. And the capacitor, I finally located it. It's a .0053, some ridiculous value like that. But all the hard parts of this radio are now done. The recapping's done. I've tested most of the resistors. You know, anything that I have to do now is out in the open. Like say if I put the radio back together to do calibration, I wouldn't have to take it back apart again. All the hard stuff has been done, and you may see some tape, and that masking tape is on the capacitors that have passed. In other words, I like the way I've got them in there, the way they're soldered, and that's what I'm going to do today, is go back in and get some of the capacitors fixed up. But the hardest capacitor on this radio is right back in here. It's a square black one. Looks like a domino, but it's chubby and square. So that's that. I told you about this capacitor out here. Yeah, there's some tricks. In other words, they'll show the part on one end of the wire to ground, when really it's on the other end of the same wire to ground. And see, what you do is, if you run a wire through the radio, you don't want signals getting on that wire. So when it gets to where it goes to, you put a capacitor from that wire to ground, and any noise that gets onto that wire then gets sent to ground. That's what they're doing. But it's when they draw it on the schematic, they show several capacitors across resistors, nice and neat. And then when you go looking at the radio, it's not like that. And that's so they can make the schematic easier. And then you got the other problem. If you get one of these, basically your schematic might not match. And I'm looking at this resistor, make sure it's not touching. Yeah, these things are quite hard. They're actually it's a nightmare. I'd use the A word, but I don't know if you can use that anymore. People are very sensitive to the A word. Yeah, it is. I won't say the circuitry is poorly designed. The layout of the actual circuit and the quality of the parts and the wiring is atrocious. They have no service loops. They pull every wire as tight as they can pull it, and then solder it. So when you go to move, say, a coil, like I told you, you have to unsolder a couple wires, and then you can move this down a little and off to the side to get to the capacitor. Normally, other radios, you wouldn't have a capacitor that's trapped like that. Let me see if this thing stayed in focus. Oh, miracle, miracle, miracles. Yeah, that's all I wanted to tell you. I think we're finishing up now. You know, I had to do this because I know out there a bunch of people have bought this radio and it's sitting somewhere on a shelf, and they started on it, and just the fact that when you go get the schematic, you have to look on the inside, the chassis inside. One of these side plates, it would be on this side, the plate. When you look on the inside, it has a run X, run something, and that tells you the rev level of the radio. Then you go down, and there's a modification sheet if you locate it, and it'll let you know how many modifications you might still have to put on the radio. They were selling this radio while they were still changing the values, and you could be troubleshooting a problem on the radio was actually the part of the poor design. Now, as far as the FM band, I wanted to tell you, now that I have all new parts in there, brand new tube, it's wonky on the FM band. It's not the greatest FM broadcast receiver. I get the strong stations here on it, but you're not going to DX on FM. Now the AM, after it's been recapped and the IF, the IF's been aligned, it's pretty good DX and AM. And 80 meters is good, 40 meters is good. I don't know how good the band is that has 10 meters. Has CB up there, and that one can also, that band can also do FM. I haven't done any listening on that, but I just wanted to update you on that one capacitor, how to get into it, and then the fact that a capacitor might be over here, but on the schematic it shows you down off, like say off the limiter tube, off a series of resistors. I call it a tree, and then you're looking there for the capacitor, and really it's on the other end of the radio. There's a lot of extra work with this radio. Now, if you fix these for a living, you would know all these tricks after a while, and it would just be a pain in the ass. But it's beyond a pain in the ass when you get one, and this is the only one you ever worked on, and the people you ask questions, you ask a question to somebody, they make up the answer. So when you're on the conferences, a lot of the answers are wrong, and it makes it really hard, And I'm pretty good. I know my circuitry. I know how it works, but the fact that this switch over here is switching the BFO for between 10.7 and 455, and then this switch over here is switching between the 455 IF and 10.7. Yeah, it's a real. They just put this thing together. This is piss prior poor planning. Years ago they would say that you build something as you go, and there's no overall design. You know what you want, but you don't really lay it out ahead of time and then put it together and then get it working. You started building section by section, and you don't think about the capacitors that are trapped down inside, because you're selling the radio, and if one comes in for repair, the tech knows how to get it apart. He knows it's going to be a pain in the ass, and then he goes in and he changes the capacitor, and he charges you for it. Now, back when this radio was made, those capacitors that are going bad now, the silver micas, they didn't go bad in the old days. It was very rare. And that's why when I started recapping this radio, I'm saying to myself, oh, thank God I don't have to recap all those silver micas. And they turned out to be bad, and I had to do it. And then one of the annoyances of that, sitting there ordering them, figuring out how many, and then you got to work with when you click on the thing, it's not available anymore, or you go to another guy and he wants a lot of money for shipping and handling, or another person that makes you buy 10. It's just, I had to sit there several hours just to figure out what capacitors I had to order that go inside those IF cans and the discriminator and the BFO. It wasn't a 1, 2, 3. Now there was a kit. I think a few weeks ago it was still up on eBay. The guy sells a kit of capacitors, I think for $150 to recap this radio. But I went and looked at it, and it seemed to not have the silver micas in there. So I don't want to say anything more because I'm not sure. But I just know there are people that bought this radio. They bought the recap kit and they never done anything. I just noticed now. See, I learned a lesson in life. It took me a long time to learn about bullshit. You know, George Carlin did. He does a whole stand-up routine. Go look at it about bullshit. And people that you work with. I built a wooden. My dad was building a wooden stagecoach, and he screwed it all up, and then he died. And he kept telling everybody about it. So I went back in and redid the whole stagecoach. And I had a guy at work tell me he built it. And then I kept questioning him. See, the brake rods, it has actually working brakes on the model. The brake rods go through the front axle. There's a cutout square. It's a beam. It's an axle beam. And then the axle goes along the beam. Well, my father had run the push rods down below the beam, and it didn't work right. And the guy kept saying to me at work that his work. Finally, one day he confessed that he started the thing and never finished it. But all along he was stringing me along. Yeah, I got this done. He was a strange dude anyway. But anyway, people bullshit, and they, one of the biggest bullshits was my father kept telling his boss at work he had a big train layout. And his boss at work kept saying he had a big train layout. So I put together a train layout. And the boss gives my father a bunch of books, layout books. And then when we went back to return the books, I went with my dad. My mother had died. And the guy was just saying, well, I don't have it set up right now. My father, and when we got back in the car, my father says, I knew he never did it. And my father figured out that he bullshitted, was bullshitting my father. My father was bullshitting him. I didn't understand people do this stuff. One time my mother had died. My dad asked me, he wanted to go out to dinner. So I went with him, and we're sitting there, and some guy behind him starts talking about, he had a house at the lake. And my father just says, yeah, I got a house at the lake. And then he just mentioned his sister had a house at the lake. He made believe it was his house. And then we were going into the car. He goes, I said something. He goes, oh, you just do that in life. When someone, interrupt, you're eating a dinner and they just decide they want to bullshit, you bullshit them back. And I'm like, wow. And that's what was happening to me. I would be telling someone what I'm working on, and they would make something up just to make conversation. And it's messed up. I tell you, I actually now I can actually show you what I work on. That's what YouTube's pretty good. And I make fun of the people that just hold the radio up and turn the dials and do a video. Or the real bad ones is they open a box with a brand new radio. They don't even know how to operate it. And they're telling you how good the radio is. Meanwhile, they can't even operate it. I keep getting that stuff recommended to me, and it makes me very angry. Because, go watch the George Carlin thing about bullshit. It's pretty funny. I didn't realize how big of a level it was at. And, this radio shuts everybody, almost everybody down. You probably got 1% of the people that buy it have actually gotten it working. I won't say they dug into it like I did. I said, no, I'm going to show people what's involved and how I work around certain problems. And I did. There it is. It's done. Again, it's done. And that's how I am. I talk about what I'm working on or what I've finished. And other people, they make stuff up. It's messed up. I think that's it. All right, that's it.